This is the case of the state versus Pat Morton. Bailiff. All rise. The Superior Court of Washington State is now in session. The Honorable Judge Anderson presiding. Judge, please be seated. This is a criminal case brought by the state of Washington charging the defendant, Pat Morton, with theft in the second degree. The state claims that Pat Morton, with an intent to deprive the owner, Mountain Top High School, of its property, stole an Apple computer valued at $2,200 from the school. Pat Morton admits that he took the computer, but denies that he had the intent to commit theft. Pat claims that he believed that he had permission to take the computer. It will be your duty to decide whether or not Pat Morton is guilty of the crime of theft in the second degree. It is important that you decide the case based on what the evidence shows. It would be wrong to decide the case because you like some lawyers or some witnesses. You must decide what really happened. It is my duty as the judge to instruct you on the law in this case. The law states that people are guilty of theft in the second degree when they wrongfully obtain unauthorized control over the property of another with intent to deprive the owner of that property, and the value of the property is more than $750 but is not more than $5,000. The government's lawyers must convince you that Pat Morton is guilty of theft in the second degree. If they fail to convince you that Pat Morton is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, then Pat Morton will go free. At the end of this case, you will be asked to decide whether or not Pat Morton is guilty of theft in the second degree. We will now begin the case. The attorneys for the government, who are called prosecuting attorneys, will go first. Prosecutor. Your Honor, counsel, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Prosecutor Ted, and I am representing the state of Washington in this case. This is a clear case of theft. The defendant, Pat Morton, really wanted to go on his ninth grade class trip to Washington, D.C. However, Pat's mother told Pat that they did not have the money and that Pat would not be able to go. The evidence will show that Pat developed a plan to get the money by taking and then selling one of the 5 new computers from Mountain Top High School. Computer teacher Dana Capro will tell you about the purchases of the 5 new Apple computers in July of last year. Each one cost $2,200. Dana will also tell you that in the second week of school, on September 15th, that a student had an epileptic fit during the last period of the day. The teacher went to the clinic with the student and was not able to return to the school until 7:30 that night to lock up the computer room. As the teacher arrived at the school, the teacher saw 3 young people at approximately 8 p.m., including the defendant, Pat Morton, at the front of the school. Pat Morton was holding one end of one of the new Apple computers and was leaving the school. The teacher took the defendant with the other 2 young people to the office and called the police. They were each arrested and charged with theft in the second degree. One of the other young people, Jamie Medina, will testify that over a month ago before the theft, Pat had admitted a plan to steal one of the new computers to get the money for the school trip. At the end of the trial today, I am sure that you will find the defendant, Pat Morton, guilty of theft in the second degree. Defense Attorney 1. Your Honor, counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not as simple as the prosecuting attorney has tried to make you believe. Instead, this is a case of a younger sibling looking up to an older sibling and believing in what that older sibling says. Pat Morton is the younger sibling of J.D. Morton, who was also there on the night of September 15th. Pat attended Village Secondary School and is a straight A student. Pat always looked up to the older sibling, J.D. Morton. It was J.D.'s idea to steal the computer to get money for Pat's class trip. JD was a senior at Mountaintop High School and had taken the computer class from Dana Capro the year before. JD will testify that on September 15th, the night Jamie and JD planned to steal the computer, that Pat showed up unexpectedly. JD could not get Pat to leave, so JD told Pat that they had permission from the school to borrow one of the computers for the weekend. JD will testify that Pat had no knowledge of how computers are used at the school and that no computers are ever loaned out. Also, the prosecuting attorneys are not able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Pat Morton intended to steal the computer. This they simply cannot do because Pat did not have the intent to steal the computer. I will ask you to return a verdict of not guilty once you have heard all the evidence. Is the prosecution ready to present its case? Yes, Your Honor. I would like to call my first witness, Dana Capro. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth? I do. Please state your name for the court and spell it. It's Dana Capro, Capro. What do you do for a living? I'm a computer teacher at Mountaintop High School. How long have you been a teacher there? I have taught there for 5 years. Can you describe the computer lab at your school? Up until this past summer, we had about 15 computers. They were pretty out of date. Last summer, the school board gave us money to buy an additional 5 computers, the newest Apple computers, each costing $2,200. I ordered these 5 new computers, and they arrived on August 12th of last year. What is the policy of Mountaintop High School on loaning out computers? The computers are never loaned out to anyone for any reason. Do you know the defendant, Pat Morton? No. Up until the night of September 15th, when I found that delinquent stealing my computers, I'd never seen him before. Objection, Your Honor. Sustained. Dana Capro, please do not use terms like delinquent in referring to the defendant. Please tell the court what happened on September 15th of last year. I was conducting my afternoon study period when a young woman student started having an epileptic seizure. There was no medical assistance available at the school, so I made arrangements to take her to the clinic. I put one of the more responsible students in charge of the class and left. It took until 7:30 that night at the clinic to get her all settled. Objection, Your Honor. Narration. Sustained. Counsel, please ask another question. What happened next? I headed back to school so that I could lock the computer room as I normally do at the end of the school day. What did you find when you returned to the school? Well, as I walked up to the computer room, I saw some figures in front of the school. It was about 8 o'clock and it was dark. So I shouted out, "Who's there?" A boy who I now know to be Pat Morton said, "Oh, it's just us coming to borrow the computer." I saw that Pat Morton was holding one end of one of our brand new Apple computers, and Jamie Medina, a junior in my computer class at Mountaintop, was holding the other end. What happened next? I saw a third person there at the door of the computer room. He must have been trying to lock the door. I realized that it was J.D. Morton, who took my computer class the year before. Well, I ordered all 3 of them to the office. I called the police. While I was waiting for the police to show up, I noticed Pat Morton was looking pretty scared and was crying. What happened next? During the 45 minutes it took the police to get there, I heard the 2 siblings talking. It turned into an argument. Pat said, "You told me the teacher said you could have the computer for the weekend." Then JD said, "Shut up, Pat. You were in this from the beginning. You knew this was for your trip money. You're the one who told Mom not to worry about the money." No further questions, Your Honor. Defense counsel, would you like to cross-examine this witness? Yes, Your Honor. Dana Capro, isn't it true that when you first saw Pat Morton, that he said, "Oh, it's just us coming to borrow the computer"? Well, yes. Isn't it also true that at the time you gave a written statement, you indicated that Pat Morton seemed quite open and natural about having the computer? Yes, but Pat Morton must be a really crafty. A yes or no question is sufficient. No further questions. Dana Capro, you may step down. Does the prosecution have any additional witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Jamie Medina to the stand. Jamie Medina, please come forward and be sworn. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth? I do. Jamie, please tell the court your name. Jamie Medina. What do you do for a living? I'm a junior at Mountaintop High School. How old are you? I'm 17 years old. Do you know the defendant, Pat Morton? Yes. How do you know Pat Morton? I'm a good friend of Pat's older sibling, J.D. Morton. We used to play basketball together after school. The only thing I never liked about being with J.D. was that his little sibling, Pat, used to follow J.D. everywhere. Pat annoyed me by trying to act like a big shot when he was only a little kid. Please tell the court about what happened on August 14th of last year. I was talking to JD. Pat was there as usual, and I told JD about the new Apple computers coming to the school. I was going to take the computer class in my junior year and would get a chance to use the new computers. I told them that the new computers cost $2,200 each. How was Pat reacting to this information? Pat was unusually quiet. Then Pat said, "Maybe that's how I can get my trip money." Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. Prosecution. Your Honor, this statement is an exception to the hearsay rule, an admission against interest, and should be allowed. Objection overruled. The witness may answer the question. So what did Pat Morton say? Pat said, "Maybe that's how I can get my trip money." Jamie, what happened on September 11 of last year? JD said that he had a plan for making some easy money and talked me into agreeing to steal one of the new computers. Did JD explain this plan? Yes. What was the plan? Since I was in the computer class, I was supposed to look around the room and see how we could steal one of the new computers. And was Pat Morton present for this discussion on September 11th? Yes, Pat was. What happened on September 15th of last year? Well, this girl in class goes into a fit during last period, and the computer teacher left to take her to the clinic. I saw this was a perfect opportunity to get the computer, and I talked to JD. He said we should come back to the school about 7:45 that night, and if the building was still open, we'd get the computer. JD didn't mention Pat was coming along, so I was really surprised when Pat showed up that night. Then what happened? JD and Pat showed up at the school about 7:45. I was pretty nervous, and none of us said much. Pat and I picked up the computer and went outside with it. JD was closing the door when the teacher appeared. I don't remember anybody saying anything, except that the teacher ordered us to the office where the police were called. What happened while you were waiting for the police? Pat was crying like a baby. Pat and JD got into an argument, but I didn't really hear what they were saying. I figured that now Pat was sad because he wasn't going to get the trip money and might go to jail. If JD says now that Pat wasn't in on it, it's only because JD is trying to protect his little sibling. Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. Sustained. The last comment will be stricken from the record, and the jury will be instructed to ignore it. No further questions, Your Honor. Defense counsel, do you want to cross-examine this witness? Yes, Your Honor. Jamie, turning your attention back to the discussion on August 14, you testified that Pat was unusually quiet, didn't you? Yes, that's true. So, it's possible that Pat was not paying any attention to your conversation with JD. Well, I guess that's possible. And you were surprised that Pat was there at Mountaintop High School on September 15th, weren't you? Yes. That was because Pat was not included in the plan to take the computer, was he? Yes. No further questions, Your Honor. Your Honor, the prosecution rests. Defense counsel, do you wish to call your first witness? Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to call the defendant, Pat Morton, to the stand.